There's 3 types of ADHD: hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and then combined. So I am combined type, but I lean heavily towards the inattentive. It means that I really struggle to keep sustained attention on things that I am not interested in. With some of my close mates, we'd joke about how erratic I was, and I'd joke about, oh, it's just the undiagnosed ADHD. I don't know why the penny just didn't drop. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together because I didn't think it was that bad, but it wasn't that bad because of the coping mechanisms I'd actually learned. The point where the penny actually dropped for me is I went to it's a virtual tech meetup. One of the talks were done by Rachel Morgan-Trimmer, who is a neurodiversity consultant. So I was just giving it a listen, and she's talking about autism, and she's talking about ADHD, and I was like, okay, now you've got my attention. Every single thing that she was saying, I was like, oh my god, I relate to that so much.
Parul Singh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
So this is the part where I take a snippet of your LinkedIn profile, 1, to see if it's true, and 2, to see how much you cringe at it. So okay. I haven't taken everything because I think some of it's not my story to tell, but in general, you're a recruitment marketing partner and a neurodiversity advocate at a company called xDesign. You're the founder of TechRise Manchester, an organising board member and neurodiversity lead at the Manchester Tech Festival, and you focus on employer branding, candidate attraction, and community partnerships.
Nailed it. You picked all the best bits.
We can edit that in. Apart from that, wwho is Parul?
Well, I don't really know what bits to pick out.
Anything you want. Start from the beginning.
My career's been here, there, and everywhere. I'm a chemistry graduate. When I had the options of working in a lab or teaching, none of them really pulled me in. So I've actually spent the majority of my career as a tech recruiter, both agency and in-house, before making the transition into recruitment marketing. I love making content on LinkedIn, namely to help job seekers navigate the minefield that is the job market, and also help them to work with recruiters better, because when you know how to work with them, you know how to find the great ones. They can be really valuable, but we know there's quite a few not so great ones out there, and it's key to actually pushing your career forward as well. In addition to the Manchester Tech Festival stuff, I've recently joined Manchester DevCon as a co-organiser. So that is Manchester's, I think, one of Manchester's first kind of software engineering conferences. I know that London gets a lot of the good stuff, so we are bringing that to Manchester for the first time in July.
July, what are the dates?
11th and 12th. So if you search, it's on my LinkedIn profile, but if you do search Manchester DevCon and you want to check it out, you can see how you can get involved, get tickets, or even speak.
Awesome. So before we get onto the recruitment marketing side,
yeah.
I'm always interested to hear people's backgrounds, but recruitment, you seem to really enjoy it, whether that be from what you're doing now or what you were doing previously. And this is where I invite you to correct me. Sometimes I think there's an opinion that recruitment is quite a temporary role for some people, but you seem to love it. Why recruitment, and what do you like about it, or what did you like about it?
Well, probably like most people, I never really grew up thinking I really want to be a recruiter.
Yeah.
So not a career choice that is generally presented to people. To be honest, after graduating from doing chemistry, I was just applying for grad jobs left, right and centre.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, but I was starting to run out of money. And then I just happened to fall into tech recruitment. And I remember starting in my first week and I was like, what the hell is .NET, C#? Agile, all of these things. I had absolutely no idea, and I was like, why have I gone into recruitment for this? There's recruiters for everything. Maybe I can just do it for something else. I'm really glad that I'm very, very stubborn, because it took me a little while to actually pick it up. And to be honest, the first company that I worked at was all right, but it was a lot of the quite traditional recruitment, very KPI driven, and they were really focused on kind of cold calling, and that's not really the aspect of recruitment that I really enjoy. I really enjoy consulting when I was in agency, my clients, on how to make their interview processes and hiring processes more inclusive, more efficient, and on the candidate side, making sure that they had a really good experience. And I don't think you can really encompass that with cold calling.
Based on making the candidate feel comfortable and having a good experience, you actually started to learn to code, I believe.
I did actually.
What was that all about?
It was a few years ago. It was when I started my second job. I was it was like the first hire in a agency recruitment like startup, and also coincided with the start of COVID.
Yeah.
So it was a very convenient time. And the reason I did it is I've been recruiting for JavaScript for almost like a year at that point, and I just really wanted to learn like more about it. Like, I'm a very curious person. Like, if somebody tells me to like look into something, like I want to like pick it apart. I want to know exactly like how it works. So I understood the tech really well. Like, I knew my Java from my JavaScript and the front end from the back end, but I had a lot of free time on the weekends as well. So I got a course on Udemy. It was called Steele's Full Stack Web Developer Bootcamp, which I really enjoyed doing. And both my Saturday and Sunday, especially during the first lockdown, I treated it almost like a work day, but instead of working, I was doing coding. So I'd wake up, get ready in the morning. I'd do a session of like coding, take a break for lunch, and then do it all in like the afternoon. And aside from wanting to actually know how it like works, I guess from a more selfish perspective, I also knew I needed to do something to get more like credibility with like candidates, because like completely understandably, I've also had the experiences. Like, I get why people don't necessarily like trust recruiters, and when you're an agency like startup as well, nobody really knows who you are. You need to work out how to stand out. So after I started to get to grips with JavaScript, I actually started to write job ads in code.
Okay.
So I don't know if you actually ever saw any of those on LinkedIn. It's obviously been a little while, but what I would do is take the different things that I was learning. So for example, like functions or like arrays and objects and stuff, I'd put what I was learning into practice and figure out a way how I could get the elements of a job advert that candidates wanted to see, put that into like JavaScript, and then share like the code snippet, which I put into like Carbon, and like share it on LinkedIn. Something really interesting that I found is that people love correcting your code. And again, for like, just because they're trying to be like really helpful, like not doing it in like a snarky way or anything. So like, I'd maybe make a little bit of a mistake on it, like not necessarily intentional. And then I get like developers commenting on it, saying like how I could improve on it. And like, unknowingly, they were boosting my engagement to get kind of like the roles that I was working on onto like, into like the right people's feeds. So yeah, it was a great experience. I haven't had as much time for it recently, but I would say recruiters like learn to do what you're recruiting for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've already answered it really, but just to reverse back, did you find that it built that trusting capability when you were ringing up, a software engineer, and you could say, oh, actually X, Y, and Z, this is what the company builds their, platform on. Yeah, did it?
Massively. Even when I was speaking to people that I'd actually never like spoke to before, like they didn't know who I was, they'd always be quite pleasantly surprised at my like knowledge of the tech, and they're like, I don't know how technical to go with this. I said, you can go as technical as you want. I promise you I will get the gist of it. And also at sort of like the peak of it, I started to my personal brand then was the recruiter that codes.
Yeah, I remember that was your headline for a while.
It was my headline. I did have to take it out because I felt, in recent months when I haven't really been like coding, I felt like it wasn't really being true to myself, and my brand has actually like evolved a little bit. But that was actually my brand for like quite a while, and I think that's a big thing about like when you're building a brand is you can't like force it. You can't like pick the thing that you necessarily want to be like known for, but it just happened like really naturally, and then it's what people actually knew me as, which was really nice.
Brilliant. So from recruiter to recruitment marketing, what does that mean? Yeah. And how did that come about?
Yeah, so I guess just like preface it with like recruitment marketing is like, it's not really a popular role. If you search it on LinkedIn, there's very few people with the job title.
I'd never heard of it before you changed yours, to be honest.
It's totally new. I mean, you might see people with like job titles which is around like employer branding.
Oh, okay.
So this is kind of that, but a little bit more like niche. So how it came about is I moved from agency recruitment to internal at xDesign just over a year ago. And then about like October time, they said that we'd like to offer you a 3-month secondment in recruitment marketing. So that means that I don't sit within the recruitment team anymore, and I sit within the marketing team. I'm not doing any hands-on recruitment, which honestly really terrified me at the time because I really got a kick out of that. And I'm not going to lie, like I do miss it a little bit. It's us, giving people like an offer, it being like maybe a little bit more like salary than like they expected, and like actually seeing the people like come in. I guess I don't really get that part of it anymore, but the aspect of recruitment marketing that I've absolutely loved is like it's more like strategy focused. So it's more around like our like career site, our like job adverts. So our job adverts were always like pretty good. We always got some really good like direct applicants, to the dismay of some of the agency like recruiters. I love some of you, but like, you know, we never really needed any sort of like external help, but they didn't really have that kind of like that secret sauce, because, you know, not being like biased or anything, but like xDesign is like hands down the best company that like I've ever like worked for. Like the culture is phenomenal. The people that I get to work with is phenomenal. And the fact that I was actually offered a secondment, pretty much like risk-free. So just, I guess for anyone who's not really sure what that means, a secondment is, you know, set periods of time where you may get moved to like a different team within the business, or kind of like a sister business. Think it can happen like that way as well, under like a parent company. And you basically kind of, you get like the training, you get to like learn the ropes in terms of like what the role is, and then at the end of it you can decide whether you want to take the plunge, or you can go back to your original role. Because I never imagined myself leaving like recruiting people, because I loved it so much, but I've loved this even more.
And was that based on someone had seen what you'd been doing, the great work you'd been doing on LinkedIn, and they thought, oh,
yeah,
or was it a combination?
Yeah, because like recruitment marketing, it's effectively like candidate like attraction, and because I was always really good at that. And like I personally think the best tools for employer branding are your employees. I think you can have like the best, you know, like work on your content online as much as you want, like all your articles and your social media presence, but ultimately people want to hear it from like the mouth of people who actually work there, because like they do trust it like a little bit more. And I was always a really good brand ambassador for xDesign. I talked about my experience of, it was the first company that I joined after getting my ADHD diagnosis. Had a great onboarding experience and like all of those other things. So they said that like, why not actually bring this into the marketing team?
Yeah,
because it's a very niche area of like marketing, but I think it's so valuable. And I do hope that more companies in the future would actually consider it as an actual role, because it's genuinely a full-time job. I think the challenge is that people don't know who it sits with, recruitment marketing or employer branding, and then it ends up being like nobody's job. They're like, you know, is it with like the strategy team? Is it the marketing team? Is it like the TA team? And then it just kind of gets abandoned. If you don't nurture your employer brand, especially in a market as competitive as tech, you're going to be spending a lot more money on external hiring than you probably want.
Yeah, I saw I'm assuming, or I can guess, that it wasn't the first job advert you'd put out, but there's one you mentioned a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, and it had really good responses in terms of you'd written the copy.
Yeah.
Could you explain some of the either subtle changes or the big changes from when how did you go about it, and what did you incorporate to make it more accessible to everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a whole process. When I actually started it, I thought like, okay, I'm going to look at the adverts. I'm going to highlight a few bits that I would probably kind of like change, maybe some of the wording, etc. And then we're like, we're good as gold. It was like opening Pandora's box. So I ended up diving into a whole load of like research, some bits on in terms of like psychology as well, kind of like human psychology. And
sorry, I should have asked this before, but what was the job specifically promoting, recruiting for?
The new one that I put out recently, that was head of business development and business development managers. Yeah.
Cool.
So that one was like the first one that we put live with kind of like the new format. So I did like a shed load of research in terms of like, you know, what are other companies doing that is like good, like what kind of like sections do they actually like have. One of the biggest like changes that I'd implemented on adverts across the board was including the hiring process. I don't know a lot of companies that actually do it, and you know, one of our values is, you know, it is being like transparent as well. So it seemed like a no-brainer. Like, let's give people an insight in terms of like, how long are the interviews? How many stages are there? What's involved? If there's a tech test, what kind of tech test is it? Are there options for it? So for our technical roles, people can either do a pairing exercise or they can do a take home. And I've also made it really clear that we do treat it as a two-way process. Like, you're not going to be interrogated. We want you to find out, you know, how much of a good fit we are for you as like you are for us, and you'll get to meet quite a range of people across, like, you're not just going to interview with like one or two people, and get a really, really good view of it. And also saying that like all applications will get a response regardless of whether, you know, we're actually like proceeding with that. And that's been received like really well. And it seems like such a small obvious thing. Like, I don't know why more people don't do it.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to this question, or at least I know the side of the fence which you sit on. So the question isn't necessarily about that, because nothing is binary. But we see a lot of just show the salary posts, etc. For people who are, you know, in the job market, because there's a lot of redundancies at the moment. And again, I think I know which side of the fence you sit on, but could you explain the perspective of why recruiters or companies wouldn't show the salary?
Yeah, I think especially with, you know, there's been like new laws passed in other countries for like salary transparency. Obviously, like the UK isn't there just yet.
Okay. I
am a big advocate for it. I didn't actually know the nuances of it. I actually did think it, you know, before going internal when I was in agency, I thought it was like very black and white, and like, you know, you should actually like put it. And the situation for other, you know, some other companies, I wouldn't say for us, is that unfortunately for some companies, they do pay new hires more than their internal people. That's not the case with us. We do have, which, you know, I'm really proud of. I think it is like a step in like the right direction. You know, if we can't have the salaries on there of like fixed salary bands, which are the same for both internal people and external people. The TA team do quarterly salary benchmarking exercises from all various like sources. So, you know, every like quarter we'll see if we need to adjust the salaries accordingly, and that'll be both for the roles that are going out and for the people that are internal. I mean, I personally had, so I joined in March last year. So between March and this January, so 10 months, I had 2 pay increases, and I never had to do a pay review. Which I've actually never had to do before, and I find the thought of it quite like daunting, to be honest, because I've gotten a lot better at like selling myself and like advocating for myself. But I think the idea of kind of like going into a room and like having to basically back up everything that you're doing and say like, hey, give me more money. So we have like the regular salary like increases. I think last July they just did like 5% like flat across the board, and said we're also doing the reviews in like January as well. So I've had almost 10% in like 10 months, which I think is pretty exceptional.
Yeah. We'll definitely get on to the self-advocacy bit.
But I wasn't, I guess, kind of like skating around like your like question. So we've got like a huge like DEI piece across the business, and there's a lot of like road mapping and like planning that is going into it, because we're not just doing like little bits here and there, and it's also not just leadership that are actually like getting involved in it. So we have obviously like the TA team and like the marketing team, like the people team, so everybody's actually like involved in that. And obviously like the conversation about the salary transparency is like a part of that. Like personally, if it was like up to me, we would like do it, but I think there's maybe a bit of a thing of like companies like competitors might not want other people to know how much they're like paying, but like we pay pretty well and we've got really good benefits. So yeah, I mean, I know the conversations are happening, so I'd hope like some point in the future, but yeah, it's a lot more nuanced than I thought.
Yeah, you just see a lot of memes knocking about, and I just it's all very well having an opinion, but I thought I'd ask someone with experience about it.
I mean, I've had like people apply and then me like respond saying like, hey, it looks great, would love to book like a call in with you. They said that, before I do that, can I just ask what the band is for the role? And I just like tell them, even if they don't ask, I tell them what the banding is in like the first stage, which is like the recruiter call. So I don't ask people what they're on. I don't ask people what they're looking for. I tell them what the banding is. I tell them what the criteria is that like we're looking for. Some of them we split the bands into kind of like 1, 2, 3, and then I say like, look, if we're going for like senior 1 band, which is kind of like the top one, we'd expect you to sort of like meet these kind of like criteria. If you meet like some of them but not like all of them, it will be like this one. And I think because of that transparency, that I make it very clear with people in the very first stage, I never had, all but one, nobody felt the need to negotiate, because they already knew that we had done a completely fair assessment. We completely justified exactly why we put them at that level and that banding. And there've actually been occasions, you know, actually quite a few where I've you know, given people an offer that's actually a fair bit like higher than what they were looking for, because they were being underpaid. Your salary for a new job should be dictated by how good you are at the job, not by how well you negotiate. And like, I'm willing to die on that hill.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, for me, as a, you know, the thing, I don't see that much of it now, but when IR35 was sort of kicking off, and although it's been around for years, for those of you who are going to correct me, recruiters just put in contract, you know, day rate of, and then not putting inside or outside, and it's like you're wasting everyone's time, because I'm going to have to then email you and go, is this role inside or outside?
Yeah.
Normally,
no one's got the time for that. Like when I reach out to people on LinkedIn, I put it in the I put it in the in-mail subject, because like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, you work for money, you don't work for free. Like, and I want to work for like a good company, and I want to make like an impact and stuff, but like, I've got to feed myself and put like a roof over my head, and like invest in like my future as well. So I don't know like why people are like, oh, they shouldn't be like money motivated. But if people are like, I don't understand why you don't want the job, which is like, you know, I had a conversation when I was interviewing, when I was like leaving like my last job. The woman on the phone, she was on the phone with me for like a good like hour, and I was really trying to get a word in to just basically say like, can you tell me your salary bands, because I don't really want to waste your time. But it was about an hour before I actually got to say it, and like the salary band was like 15k less than I was on. I said, I'm not gonna proceed, unfortunately. And I think it's just like, it's just respectful.
Yeah, because recruiters are busy people and they do a great job. So from the outside, you would think that, you know, get to the point and then they can move on. I'm sure it's more nuanced than that, because they want to get the data, they want your emails and etc. But just be honest. Okay, moving away from that slightly, you've got the additional role of being a neurodiversity advocate. Once again, go into as much detail as you're comfortable with, but how did that come about? And can you explain to people who may have certain, you know, opinions, biases, whatever? I'm not neurodiverse myself, so that's why I want people like you to sort of talk about it.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's all about like educating. I didn't even know the term neurodiversity existed until about 3 years ago.
I've just said I'm not neurodiverse. I'm sure that's wrong, but you know what I mean. I'm not. I haven't.
No, it's all right.
I'll just leave it there.
Don't worry. No. I think it's just, again, like the particulars with like the language, like it really doesn't like bother me like too much. But you would say as like an individual, I am neurodivergent, and like a group of people are like neurodiverse, which can include neurodivergent people and neurotypical people.
Neurotypical. I would say I'm neurotypical then.
There you go.
See, you learn something new every day.
Nailed it. Perfect. So that basically came about because like I said earlier, xDesign was like the first company that I had joined since I got my ADHD diagnosis about 2 years ago. So of course they knew about it, so I didn't have to kind of, I guess, like formally disclose it. It was like literally all over my LinkedIn, like my like header. Had it not been, I think I definitely would have disclosed anyway, because I was in a position where, you know, at like the time, like my skills as an experienced tech recruiter were quite like in demand, and I'll probably use it as a bit of like a litmus test as well, see how they respond. So I want to actually work there. But you know, it was like received like really, really well. I said like, you know, my ADHD makes me like really good at these things. Like I'm great with people. I'm great with like building relationships. I'm really good with, you know, sort of like juggling like different things and thinking outside of the box and streamlining processes, etc. And they seem to really like that. And, you know, when I came in, I felt like really comfortable actually like talking about it. And I did a bit of like an internal session on, so we have like a series of internal sessions called My Experience of, and then anybody can come forward. So people have done them like, you know, my experience of like being gay, having like chronic illness, having ADHD, being autistic, etc. So it was like around that time when I'd kind of like been advocating for some like small improvements to some of our interview processes, which came about from somebody asking for some like reasonable adjustments as they have ADHD, and they said like, thank you for being so open about it on like LinkedIn. So it kind of like came to me as that I'm like really driven to make change on like a bigger scale as well. I think like we're quite a naturally like inclusive company. Maybe some of it like unconsciously, just because of like the culture that we have, just being like very like flexible, and it just like attracts diverse people. But I really wanted to make like a conscious effort towards being more neuro inclusive. So like this kind of role had never existed at xDesign like before. So we have like STEM ambassadors, we have somebody who does the sustainability community and stuff, but this was a little bit different. So it was in my 3-month probation, I think there was a little box to say that, is there anything else that, you know, you'd like to talk about or that you'd like to do, or any skills that you'd like to build? I said I'd like to be a neurodiversity advocate. I don't know exactly what it would look like, but this is something that I'm really passionate about. And they were just like, yeah, sure. Like what I love about them is that like, they kind of have this sort of like default to yes, like principle. Like as long as it's kind of like feasible and like it could be like a good idea, like let's go for it. And I think that's genuinely such good quality to have. Like I have never been, you know, straight up like fobbed off on like something. Like obviously there's like restrictions in terms of like budget and like resources, and like you can only do like one thing at like once, but it's like never a hard no. So we kind of like shape the role. So it's kind of like us have like a couple of hours a week, and I work directly with Carol, who's one of our people partners, and we have a catch up every 2 weeks, and we've done stuff like our like reasonable adjustment policy. So if anyone who listening who doesn't know what that is, a reasonable adjustment is a legal requirement for employers like landlords, I think, like business owners, like a lot of different people, to make adjustments to reduce barriers for disabled people and people with mental health conditions in the workplace. But a lot of people actually don't know that. So we work together on, we took the little section of the diversity and inclusion kind of like policy, and the reasonable adjustment stuff was just like a few lines on that. We took that out and made a complete 8-page document out of it, and created a process and made sure that anybody who needs reasonable adjustments to remove those like challenges in like the workplace actually has a process to follow, that the expectations are like really clear. Like we define what like reasonable adjustments are. We're bringing like training for you know, like interviewers and like line managers as well. And we now have like an internal community of, I think there's about 70 people at xDesign within the Slack channel for neurodiversity. And bearing in mind, like we're just over 400 people. A lot of people in that channel are also like line managers as well, which I find really interesting. So either there's a lot of those who are neurodivergent themselves, or they're line managing people who are neurodivergent and they just want to learn more about it. But I think either way, seeing how it's taken off and seeing how much of an impact it has actually like made within the business is just like absolutely phenomenal. I think it's one of the most fulfilling things I've ever got to do.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. I mean, it's impressive, and I tip my hat to you. Reversing back slightly, and again, be as open or as close as you want, really. How did that diagnosis come about? And there's I know I think it's true with autism and younger females that they mask it.
Yeah.
I'll hold my hands up. I'm not sure if that's the same with ADHD.
Yeah.
Because again, you're young, but from a diagnosis point of view, it was after school. So did no one pick up on it? Was it you just sort of spotting different traits from doing a bit of research? Like what happened?
So the thing that actually triggered it, it's actually funny because some of my close mates would like joke about how like erratic I was, and I joke about it's just the undiagnosed ADHD. I was like, I don't know why the penny just didn't drop, but like I didn't really put 2 and 2 together, because I didn't think it was like that bad, but it wasn't that bad because of the coping mechanisms I'd actually learned to basically like mask it and like deal with it. But the point where the penny actually dropped for me is I went to it's like a virtual tech meetup, and obviously 2 of the talks were like technical talks, and then the other one was done by Rachel Morgan Trimmer, who is a neurodiversity consultant on neurodiversity. So I was like, okay, interesting. So I was just giving it a listen, and she's talking about autism, and she's talking about ADHD, and I was like, okay, now you've got my attention. So I was like, every single thing that she was saying, I was like, oh my God, I relate to that like so much. And it's not I'm not like very physically hyperactive. I say that, and I'm probably like, I'm spinning on my chair a little bit, and I've got my fidget toy as well. But I'm like, you know, I can like sit still, and I'm not like incredibly like impulsive. So there's 3 types of ADHD. Hyperactive, impulsive is one. Inattentive is the other, and then combined type, which is a combination of like the 2 of them. So I am combined type, but I lean heavily towards the inattentive type. And because those symptoms are completely internalized, the majority of it is going on inside my head. Nobody really seemed to pick up on it.
And what does inattentive mean for those of?
It means that I really struggle to, you know, keep sustained attention on things that I am like not interested in. I zone out a lot in sort of like mid-conversation. I really struggle a lot with like longer meetings as well. Sometimes I struggle with, you know, reading like body language and like social cues. I do sometimes like interrupt people like accidentally because I don't really kind of pick up on the cues when it's like kind of like my time to talk. I've struggled with kind of like impulsive like spending, self-soothing with like alcohol. I used to drink like a lot, and what I didn't actually realise, probably until like recently actually, it was much after my diagnosis, I didn't realise that my issues with alcohol, it was when I would go out, like if it was like at like home, like a house party or a flat party, I tended to be okay, and it was because of my sensory issues. So I'm very easily triggered by, you know, a lot of like busyness, like loud noises, music, all of those sorts of things. So I wouldn't realise when I'm out at like the bar or the club that I have drank way too much because I'm like medicating, and I never knew that was actually a part of having ADHD. I feel rejection and failure so intensely. I can almost like feel it like physically, which actually has a name for it, which is called rejection sensitive like dysphoria. So you can imagine that was probably quite hard when I was working in agency recruitment, because it's kind of 95% like rejection.
People telling you to piss off, basically.
Pretty much. To be fair, I didn't really get it as much because I was an ethical recruiter. But, you know, like people saying kind of like, you know, like not interested, or thinking I've got like a really solid like candidate for the role. And then like the client is just like, oh no, they're just like not right for it. And then having to tell the candidate, and then they're quite upset. And then I get upset. Like, you know, it's also emotional like dysregulation. Like sometimes if I'm having quite an emotionally like charged conversation with like somebody, like I will sometimes just see like red, and I get the blinkers on, and it can be really hard to actually like control. And
isn't that just coming from Liverpool though?
Maybe a little bit. Are you saying
that was a joke? That was a joke for
just in case there's any Scousers who are actually like listening. So
well, I live on the Wirral, so I get
Well, my parents live in Crosby, so we'd both be counted as plastic Scousers.
Well, I'm from North Wales, and I'm like a tourist on the Wirral, so I don't even count.
What football team do you support?
Wrexham. Oh. Before all the hype.
All the Ryan Reynolds stuff.
Yeah, before all of that.
I think that's so wild. Like out of all the football teams, Wrexham.
It's just the closest to North Wales, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
That's the biggest. It was the biggest football team.
Fascinating.
But anyway, back on track. What are your thoughts? And again, be as open or as closed, be as honest.
I'm an open book. I'm an open book, Jack.
On the whole, undiagnosed ADHD stuff that gets posted on LinkedIn, in terms of X or Y person is a business owner and they're very vocal about having ADHD, but it's undiagnosed. What are your thoughts on that? Again, I'm asking this as someone who is seeking to understand, because it could be very easy to go like how can you be so vocal about something that you're sort of self-diagnosing essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good topic, and I think particularly in like the workplace, like people don't really know how to approach it. And to be fair, I know that how I felt afterwards, and I kind of like I almost like gaslit myself into I convinced myself for 6 months that it wasn't like true. I was like, but like I don't do this, and I don't find that like really hard.
Yeah.
So I can't even like imagine how people who are like self-diagnosed might actually like interpret it, because even people with like a medical diagnosis are still kind of like struggling with a lot of like the same like stigma. I personally think because of how hard it is to actually get a medical diagnosis, I know somebody who was on a wait list for the NHS for 5 years.
Right.
I know somebody else who's still on the wait list 8 years later. So let's not kid ourselves into saying that like, just go private, because that costs thousands of pounds. You've got to get like private. What people don't realise is that after the diagnosis, you have to have private prescriptions. You can't pay NHS prescription prices, which can be anywhere from £25 to £250 a month, which is a lot of money. So from my personal perspective, a self-diagnosis is like equally as valid as a medical one, and you actually have the same legal rights in like the workplace as well. So you can still request reasonable adjustments for like interviews, reasonable adjustments at work. You can still, you're still eligible for the Access to Work grant, which is a government fund for basically supporting the workplace. So like it can be travel if you struggle getting like to and from work. It can be like software, equipment, all that kind of stuff. Even the government know how hard it is to get a diagnosis, so they will accept people with a self-diagnosis for that scheme.
And how would you go about tackling the people who take advantage of that system?
I think because I think we have to pick our battles. I think because they do exist, not going to deny that, but I think because they're in such a minority of people, our bigger problem is actually getting the help to the people who actually need it.
Yeah.
The amount of people that I spoke to who have like ADHD, who are like autistic, they don't even know that what kind of reasonable adjustments they can actually ask for. They don't know what their legal rights are. They don't know that they can have the access to like work like scheme.
Yeah.
I think you have to be a special kind of person. I'm not going to swear. You have to be a special kind of person to abuse those kinds of things, but I think they exist everywhere. There are people that take advantage of things like this because they see that, you know, people like this do get additional help, but that's not because it's any kind of special treatment. It's because the playing field is not even.
Yeah. I suppose that question comes from, you see a lot of it at the moment. And again, this is not me criticizing. It's just an observation of, you may see someone with a particular headline of, I'm a business owner using my undiagnosed ADHD as a superpower, which is great. I just don't know if everyone is being as honest sometimes. Maybe they are, and maybe I'm just being cynical, but I imagine all of us sometimes tick some of those boxes in terms of, that doesn't mean automatically that I'm going to, diagnose myself as
as
X,
when
Y,
people
or
are
Z.
like, oh, everyone's like a little bit like ADHD. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like everybody exhibits some traits, but you'll only be diagnosed if you exhibit them to kind of like such extreme levels that it impacts your day-to-day life.
I suppose the better way of me putting it would be when someone flippantly says, oh, it's my OCD. Now, to me, that puts a massive shadow over the people who are struggling from a day-to-day point of view.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the flippant, I like all my Coke cans facing the right way.
It's for people who have it.
Yeah, it's intrusive thoughts all of the time. And I think flippantly saying anything, whether that is, oh, you know, I'm on the spectrum, oh, that's my ADHD, or oh, that's my OCD, takes away the light that should be shined on, like you said, the people who really need the help. But it's interesting to hear someone who actually is dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. I got deep.
It was deep.
Self-advocacy at work. What does that mean?
So I didn't really actually kind of think about it much as a phrase, but like self-advocacy is kind of effectively the ability to be kind of your own like cheerleader and to being the person that'll actually like back yourself up as well. As somebody who's actually only really been in the working world for about 5 years, which feels incredibly short considering it feels like it's been like a lot longer. I've learned a lot like during that time. I think unfortunately when I joined the startup, like my previous job as well, I don't know if it started as intentional or it was like unintentional, but they took advantage of kind of like how little experience I actually like had, and I'm quite, I would say naive, but I think it's one of my good traits is that I do give people like the benefit of the doubt, and I like to think of like the best in people, but unfortunately, you know, it got to a point where that actually worked against me, and I had to learn how to actually like advocate for myself, which obviously like resulted in quite a lot of effectively legal proceedings against them, which was actually me advocating for myself. It was my self-advocacy there specifically was actually understanding my legal rights and what is also morally right or wrong. That culminated in me basically winning 2 tribunals against my ex-employer, which was ongoing from when I handed in my notice at the end of January until the end of March when the second tribunal actually happened. So it's taken up an enormous proportion of my life. I couldn't have done it without the union that I had joined. So it meant that I actually didn't incur any like legal like fees, but this whole process has just taught me like a massive like lesson. I really hope that I never have to do that like ever again, because it was one of the most emotionally and physically draining things that I've ever experienced. It actually triggered, like last January I had like insomnia triggered, which kind of came in bouts, but it still hasn't gone away, unfortunately. I've not been able to completely like cure it and treat it. It like comes and goes, but it really impacts like my day to day. Like it really took a toll on my mental health. So I think there's two sides to like the self-advocacy. There is the one extreme where I picked my battles, and I was so far deep into it that I wasn't going to walk away, and I knew I wasn't going to get any money out of it because they had started to like close down like operations. So it was never ever for that. But I think it's the justice sensitivity part of having ADHD as well. I was like, I'm going to fight for what is right. And I think, you know, I won't go into like kind of the minute details of it, but, you know, effectively they had failed to set me up into a pension scheme. This was where it all started, which then I had identified, and also hadn't taken any deductions for my student loans. Because I was in agency recruitment, there were only some months where I broke the threshold, so I kind of didn't really notice that, but started raising issues about it, and their treatment of me like completely changed. They treated me like completely different to like other people. They were basically saying that no, you can't have this annual leave for 6 days in like 3 months time, and just started like victimizing me off like the back of that. There was like disability discrimination involved as well, where they'd basically at Work Social, the two directors, which was basically the people that were both of them doing this to me. I literally had like nobody else. There was no HR, nobody to like talk to. I was like so like alone, and still, you know, still quite kind of like new to it. And so what had happened is this was probably about a year and a half ago, they'd like put me aside at like basically like a Work like social thing, and told me like we think you're posting about ADHD too much online, and we just don't want you, you know, we just don't want it to like define you. So boasting's a strong word. Oh, I thought you said boasting. No,
I was
sorry.
like, Jesus,
that might be my accent because I'm Scouse, you know. So that might be a yeah. So they said that we just think like you're posting about it like too much.
Even
much
that
online.
though, to be fair, even like sure, we'll get onto the tips for, you know, people knowing their rights, but the thought that a company could even have a sense of ownership over your own social media is a bit nuts, isn't it?
I mean, not that it even matters, but I was maybe doing like one post about it every like 2 weeks.
Yeah. But even if you were doing it every day, like people can have their opinions, and that's different to, you know, taking control over someone's social media and what they should be, you know, unless they're, you know, tweeting the Daily Mail, which is a different topic. But yeah, that just blows my mind that anyone would even consider that to be a normal thing to do.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of like things involved there, and they didn't like pay me like my final like pay. They basically took like enormous like deductions out of it, claiming that it was for the backdating all of the pension. They actually said that I was in minus, so I actually owed them money, and they sent me like invoices and stuff. They contacted my now employer while I was in garden leave in an attempt to make me lose my job with completely fabricated like claims that I had like intellectual like property and stuff like that. And like they backed me up without even having to like speak to me first. They spoke to me after they'd actually like responded, but like they fully well knew what they were doing with that, and that could have ended very differently. Like if it was another company, I could have lost like that job. And like I think that workplace like trauma as well, because you know like we, like people know about unfortunately like trauma in like relationships and how it can manifest itself in like new relationships as well. You know, the unfortunate thing is that like I've never experienced anything of that kind at xDesign. It's actually been like the complete like opposite, and they've done everything to make sure that like I feel like safe, that I have a safe like space, that like, you know, my needs are like going to be met and I'm going to be like supported. But in like the back of my head, some of that still does like stick like with me. I find myself like just putting like the walls up like like a little bit as well, and I'm still like really cautious just for like no reason. I don't think we maybe talk about that enough, carrying your old workplace trauma through to like your future jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought about it like that before. Interesting.
Yeah.
I have some self-reflection on the way home. And is that company still, surely they're not still going?
They're in the process of liquidating now, actually.
Well, that's sort of the proof is in that pudding, I suppose, isn't it?
Pretty much. Well, the ironic thing is that I was bringing in the majority of the money. They couldn't attract or afford experienced recruiters. So I was bringing in over about 2/3 of like the revenue in the 6 months up to like when I left. So it really confuses me that they just decided to like turn on me and then didn't really know what they actually like expected, and not really sure it's a massive coincidence that they did end up basically like closing like down like afterwards. But you know, I try now that especially like the tribunal's like over, I do try not to like think about it, but I do like talk to some people about it, and like for the point of like raising like awareness as well. Like going through a tribunal is actually like really, really difficult. But if somebody's like violated your rights, I am literally like, they've stolen thousands of pounds from me, from both my pension and like my last pay as well. And but I won, but they're still not going to face any repercussions because they don't have any money to like pay me. And it just blows my mind that like they can actually get away with this. They're both running like other businesses now and happily like doing that, and like they know what they've done, and they're not going to pay that money back. They don't have to. They can't.
Not good.
Not good.
So taking all of that experience, you know, if people are in a similar position to you, or you know, earlier on in their career, taking what you've learned into account, what tips would you have for people knowing their rights based on what you've been through?
The first thing is to join a union. So I didn't even know that I could actually join one as like a tech recruiter, but it was like I technically worked in tech. So I joined a tech union, which is I think you say it UTAW, UTAW. It's part of the CWU union. And they're really good with like, I think the membership's about like £8 something like a month, and I think it's a great cause to actually like support as well. So they're really good with like even just kind of like the more like informal things. Like it doesn't have to like get to like that point. Obviously I haven't actually had to speak to them like since, which is great, but I still continue to like pay that membership to like support them with it. So they're really good at kind of like helping you like untangle that. If you are neurodivergent, most of the times by law, even if you don't consider it yourself, you are classed as disabled, because a disability is, I can't always like remember it like word for word, but it's effectively having a like long-term or lifelong condition that significantly impacts your day-to-day life. And a lot of like neurodivergent conditions do actually like fall under that like category. So understanding like what like your rights are like there as well. But I think like the other side of it is that we talked about self-advocacy. I think you still need to know how to advocate for yourself in the workplace, and I think it's not always like a bad thing, because I never expect anybody to know what my needs are, especially when I work remotely. Like somebody's maybe not actually going to see that like I'm like visibly maybe struggling with like longer like meetings as well. Like I can't really kind of like focus on one thing at once. I'm maybe just a little bit overwhelmed, untangling my work and like different things. It's like I said, it's a little bit like less visible. So I think like first get into a place where you can actually like talk about it to, you know, like your line manager or people in like the HR team as well. Like I think there is a lot more like awareness about it as well. Maybe not necessarily kind of sort of like jump to the conclusions. Like I think definitely like get the help first, and maybe just help them understand like a little bit, because a lot of the time it's not intentional. There's still work to be done around the like education in like neurodiversity and like the workplace as well. And like I don't know everything, like experts don't know everything. So I think approach it as a two-way like conversation, and go into it with the expectation that they don't know anything about you, they don't know anything about your condition or necessarily what like you need as well. And you know, that's what like I've done here, and I've been able to have really open conversations, and because they understand the ways that I work best, I've been able to create like ways of working where I've like really thrived in the role. And it's, I guess, I'm like having those conversations. But you know, of course, if happened to be the case that I didn't maybe let go as well, is like know your rights.
What's next? What else have you got on your plate at the moment or in the future?
It's a lot of like community stuff. So that's one thing that I really loved about tech recruitment, is like doing loads of events. So I used to do like roundtables for like clients, which was like never with like a hidden agenda. Like I genuinely really loved like going to them, and it was kind of like, hey, like if you decide that you want to like work with me off the back of that, then like great. And if you don't, like totally understand. So bringing like people together and like connecting people and getting them to like start the conversations is something that like I genuinely really love. I used to co-organise like Manc Web meetup, which is obviously quite a bit more of a technical meetup. And then I thought, because I'm not in tech recruitment anymore, I thought like my heart's not really like in it anymore. So I started running, started a new meetup group called Tech Rise, which is it's targeted at people who work in tech, but it's all around like I don't like calling them soft skills, but that's what they are, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which I think like people have said like they don't have like training on like a lot of the things. They'll have like technical training. They don't have training on like how to deal with like difficult like colleagues, or you know, again, like self-advocacy in like the workplace, or like getting a mentor and like, you know, internal like mentors and like stuff like that. So that's all of the stuff that like we cover. So like the first one that we did was on like mentorship. The next one that we're doing on the 1st of June is on like vulnerability in the workplace, and we're having a panel, and we're also doing like a speed networking session as well afterwards. I hope it's going to go terribly right, not terribly wrong, because it'll be like the first time that I've actually like organised it. But again, I just love seeing people like, you know, like sparking a conversation. Like I think that's the thing that like really lights me up inside. Like it brings me so much joy.
We'll put the links. I say we. I haven't got a bloody team. I will put the links in the description. Is that like on meetup.com, or is it separate?
So it's all on like meetup.com. They're all run in person in Manchester, but we're really inclusive like group. So if you want to come along, then like join the group. Obviously, if you're listening to this after the 1st of June, do just join it anyway, because we're going to have events like every like 3 months. And there's also links on there, like the meetup page, for if you want to like volunteer to like speak as well. So I got into kind of doing like public speaking and podcasts and everything about like 3 years ago, because somebody, Becky Irving, who was freelancing with Manchester Digital at the time, reached out to me on LinkedIn and asked me if I would be on a panel for digital hair. And I was like, who, me? I've literally been in tech recruitment for about like a year and a half at this point. And I was like, I don't really know what I have to add to this conversation. I genuinely didn't think I had anything to like bring to the table. And she had a chat with me, and she like convinced me to do it. And like, I caught the bug after that, and I owe so much to Becky for that, even though, you know, she maybe won't admit it, but like she really was like the catalyst to that. So in a similar way, I want to give people the opportunity to get into doing something which they really want to do, but it might be a little bit scary. So we welcome people who have never given talks before particularly to do the lightning talks, because they're only 5 minutes. You don't have to have slides. I'll also help you with like a little bit of like the prep as well, and like it's a really like friendly audience. So if like I can create that to be like the gateway to people to doing a little bit more of it, then yeah, you know, that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to bring with like this group as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
If people were to reach out, say hello, what's the best way to do that if you feel comfortable in sharing that information?
Yeah, of course. So you can pop my LinkedIn into the podcast description if you want. If people don't have LinkedIn, then you can also put my Twitter. If you don't have either, I don't exist.
Yeah,
that's
good.
They will be like the best way to like reach me. So, you know, I do get quite a lot of like messages from people who are asking about, you know, sort of like maybe like mentorship. So I might give them a bit of advice, or if I don't have capacity, I'll point them in the right direction. People asking about, you know, they've got like a job offer, but it's a bit lower than like they expected, to help people like negotiate like the job offers and stuff like that. People asking for advice, being like, who are like ADHD, like autistic in like the workplace, and maybe want some like thoughts. If I can't help people, I'll always try and point them in like the right direction. So if you're listening to this, maybe resonated with anything that I've like talked about, like please reach out. I love hearing from new people.
Awesome. Any final thoughts?
Just thank you so much for having me on this. Like, it was like really good to talk about like all of the kind of like different topics, and I hope that something that I've mentioned is maybe, you know, everything that I do is to start a bit of a spark, make people a little bit curious. Like, you know, this is the first time I've heard more detail about being like neurodivergent in the workplace. I want to learn a little bit like more about it. So that's all I hope to kind of achieve from this. And thanks so much for having me on.
Definitely, I've enjoyed it. I've learned something, and I'm sure people watching, listening, however they're consuming this will have as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this month's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, please let us know in the comments, and also tell your mates, like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.